So when it comes to macronutrients, we have three main categories to concern ourselves with: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And we're going to talk about how each of these has a unique impact on blood sugars. And then when you combine them, they have a different synergistic effect on our blood sugars, our insulin sensitivity. And we're going to briefly touch upon micronutrients as well. Things like magnesium, fat-soluble vitamins, trace minerals, they all impact blood sugars as well.
So let's begin with carbohydrates. Now, carbs are probably the most talked about macronutrient when it comes to diabetes, and that's for a good reason, because they have the most direct and rapid impact on our blood sugars. They are broken down into glucose during digestion. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of carbs to think about. You think about how the sugar in an apple is very different than the sugar that you put in your coffee. Context has a lot to do with how your body handles carbohydrates. Now, for simple carbs, these are the carbs that are going to have a more rapid impact. There's less digestion to happen in order to extract the glucose from the food. Things with glucose in it: fructose, galactose, sucrose, lactose. And these are foods that are going, you eat them and your blood sugars rise immediately. This could be fruit. This could be baked goods with that table sugar in it. Lots of different combinations of food that have a more rapid impact on blood sugars. There are also the complex carbs. And I know when it comes to, I'll mention whole grain specifically. It could be bread, it could be pasta. With type 1 or diabetes in general, are always encouraged to have whole wheat versions of those because complex carbs are broken down more slowly. The reason they're broken down more slowly has to do with the structure of the sugar molecules within them. Now, starch and glycogen are basically long braided strands of glucose and all the other simple carbs that have been combined in different ways. So starch is basically long strands of glucose that you find in plants, right? This is how plants store energy within their bodies. Now, there's also glycogen. This is animals' version of starch. This is basically just glucose tied into chains to be stored and used for later. Now, cellulose is very similar to starch in that it's used by plants. It's glucose molecules arranged in chains and strands. However, for cellulose, the glucose does not get digested. This is basically where dietary fiber comes from, right? Cellulose tends to be structural. So it's kind of an interesting tidbit about glucose. It can be used for structure and to help build things. It can also be used to help the nutrient for an energy source. So cellulose, anything from all plants' cell walls, the things that make them stand and grow, they are basically all grown from glucose, right? The only difference is our body can't break them down. And so our body has to work a lot harder to move them through the digestive system. So cellulose, that's where we get our fiber. Starch and glycogen are storage molecules that take a little bit more time to break into smaller pieces. And then you have your simple carbs that are more readily available and are going to have a more rapid impact on increasing your blood sugar. So let's move on to proteins. So proteins are celebrated in the world of diabetes because of the impact they have on our blood sugar. Now, it has minimal direct impact on blood sugar, right? So it's not like, oh, you're going to eat protein, it's going to be broken down into sugar like glucose is, and your blood sugar is going to spike. However, it does have an indirect effect on it. So when you eat protein, it can stimulate the release of glucagon, which is released from the alpha cells of your pancreas. This is going to signal your liver to release stored glycogen, which is a sugar. So protein can be a middleman in increasing your blood sugars. However, it won't be direct. The reason protein is celebrated is because of its stabilizing role. Protein, when it's combined with carbohydrates, will slow how quickly your body digests it. So it can really help stabilize blood sugars and prevent those rapid spikes after a meal, because your body has to work a little bit harder to break it down and move it through your digestive system. Now, we'll go up just one more to this point here. So in excess, when there is a lot of protein, and this is especially true for low carb diets, things like ketogenic and carnivore, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the podcast. When there is not a lot of carbs, which is the preferred source of energy, that's kind of like the preferred method of getting blood sugar to the rest of our cells. Protein can actually become and made into glucose. And this is through a process called gluconeogenesis, basically new sugar genesis. And this is done by taking the amino acids, all of the constituents of the protein, and turning it into glucose so that our cells can use what used to be protein and use it as a source of glucose. This is in extreme cases, like I said, with low carb diets where proteins and fats are the only source of fuel that your body has available. But this does have an impact. This can have an impact on your blood sugar on the line. Now, I don't know if anyone here, I'll talk from my personal experience. I'm a weightlifter. I spent a lot of time doing resistance training. And when I was in college as a college athlete, whey protein shakes were a big thing, right? As a means of building muscle and fueling our body. Whey protein shakes spike my blood sugar. Why? Because it's this sudden inrush of protein. Rarely drank it with anything else. And so my body saw that protein shake as the only source of fuel it had available at a very high metabolically demanding time. And so it would convert that protein into glucose, and thus my blood sugar rose. So just an interesting little tidbit here. People think that if you eat protein, you don't have to worry about your blood sugars. Not true. Now, let's also talk about fats, because fats are very important in the realm of diabetes. It's going to be hard when you look in the mainstream narrative to find the constructive information, because what you'll find is largely like, oh, fats are bad. Fats lead to too much fat leads to insulin resistance, what have you. It's not that straightforward. So the primary effect of fats on our blood sugar is that they don't raise them directly, right? They're kind of like protein in that they help slow the digestion of carbohydrates. They kind of work together with carbs to make sure that things aren't being pushed through our digestive system too quickly and adversely impacting our blood sugar. So this can lead to a more gradual release. It lets your insulin work a little bit faster. It doesn't make your insulin have to work so fast. It prevents spikes, what have you. Now, there are different kinds of fats. Saturated fats, this is going to be things like butter, things that are stable at room temperature. So coconut oil has some saturated fat in it. It's mostly monounsaturated fats, I believe. Tallow is a saturated fat. But there are also unsaturated fats. You've got monounsaturated fats, like I mentioned, coconut oil, and then polyunsaturated fats as well. These are the liquid oils at room temperature. These are the seed oils, processed oils, things like olive oil, things like avocado oils, canola oil, vegetable oil, sesame oil, you name it. The tidbit there at the end, diets high in processed fats can worsen insulin resistance and inflammation, particularly in individuals with type 1. A high-fat diet needs to consider necessary supporting nutrients to ensure proper fat utilization and active oxygen species disposal. Now, this is an important point when it comes to fat digestion, because we'll hear all the success stories from ketogenic diets and carnivore diets, which are high-protein, high-fat diets, on blood sugar. but then we'll also simultaneously, in mostly the type 2 world, honestly, that if you have too much fat in your diet, this is going to negatively impact your body's ability to use insulin. So it's kind of confusing to have information on both of those ends. What it comes down to is the quality of the fat that you're eating. Saturated fats can be a very good thing for your body if you have the means of properly using it. This has to do with the cleanliness of your liver, the cleanliness of your GI tract, so that your body has all of the tools to properly use it. And to that last point, you also need specific vitamins and minerals to properly metabolize those fats. So the anti-fat campaign in the diabetes world, in my opinion, boils down to basically malnutrition. It's eating a lot of fat without any of the proper tools to properly use it. Okay. Then on the carnivore and ketogenic side, it's a lot of fat and a lot of protein. And people think, oh, because it's not a direct carb, that means it's not going to impact my blood sugar, so I can just, go on and won't have to worry about it. Not necessarily the case because of gluconeogenesis and its ability to turn that protein into glucose. All right. And to that point about those other nutrients, don't let the macros steal all the attention, right? We need to make sure that we're getting the other stuff that our body needs to properly use glucose, protein, and fats. Magnesium is a major mineral in all of that. Okay. I want to say magnesium is used in every enzymatic process required for metabolizing glucose. So if you don't have enough magnesium, it means that your body isn't operating at maximum capacity when it comes to properly using that sugar and moving it through your digestive system. Those fat soluble vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, those are going to help your liver, right? Those are going to help your liver properly digest fats by the release of bile. It's going to help store glycogen properly and interact with your pancreas in a better way to better stabilize blood sugars. And then trace minerals, zinc, copper, chromium, selenium, manganese, these are very important in our body's natural ability to handle inflammation and properly digest foods, kind of on the greater grand scheme of the digestive system as a whole, but also at the cellular level for the tract of your digestive system, the beta cells themselves, the alpha cells themselves, as well as your liver cells. Electrolyte balance, sodium, potassium, calcium, these are all important for basic cellular dynamics and making sure that membrane potentials are working properly and that all of the food can be absorbed properly. All of the cells, when that food becomes available to the cell, can be used properly. And then all of the antioxidants in those plants to help your body get rid of all of the waste when it comes to that, because waste disposal also has a major part in all of this.